Lights out, green flag, let's go! On today's episode of the Thunder Road Podcast, it's our Father's Day special. This is an episode you won't want to miss. One of South Texas many racing fathers, Steven Whiteaker Jr. The Thunder Road Podcast, telling the stories of South Texas racers from the past and present.
Hello, my name is James Parks, and welcome to the Father's Day edition of the Thunder Road Podcast. At this time, I'd like to thank our sponsors: Rush Race Gear by Austin Witt, SNS Monuments, Top Hat Signs and Designs, 112 Bodies, and Pearl Lane Fabrication. On this episode of Thunder Road Podcast, we have Steven Whiteaker Jr. He discusses the highs and lows of his family being involved in racing. Welcome to another edition of the Thunder Road Podcast. This is a special edition. This is the Father's Day. The Father's Day version of Thunder Road Podcast entails Steven Whiteaker Jr. He's here on the show. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the Whiteaker racing past. We're going to dabble on the present, but I more so want to hear some of the stories that most folks don't know. So with that being said, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me. I'm not yet a sharer, but I'm definitely a subscriber.
We're going to work on that and do some sharing. Now that you've seen the whole operation, could you please tell the public it's not filmed with my phone?
Yeah, there's an iPhone in the vise over there that's pointed straight at us.
That's the misconception we get.
It's actually an iPhone 8. So
I don't even own an iPhone, so I'm an Android guy. But the misconception we get all the time is, oh man, y'all are just filming that with your phone. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, this is very, very impressive. Which I've heard the story, so I mean, it's this ain't no. I mean, it's a real deal here.
We enjoy doing this. I do this for the local racers, but it's also very hard for me because sometimes I feel like I don't get a whole lot back from the local racers, and I've just learned to accept that. I'm going to continue doing what I do as long as I enjoy it, as long as I can get the stories out there, because there's a lot of stories in the Coastal Bend that don't get told, and I think that they need to be told. There's a lot of racing history in South Texas that needs to be told, and hopefully that's what we're going to do today. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Who are you? How many dogs you got? How many chickens you got? How many wives you got?
Well, I can't. I mean, she's right over there, so I can't tell you everything.
Pretend she's not here.
Obviously, my name is Steven Whiteaker Jr. I'm 36. I have 4 great kids. We have 3 dogs, and every one of them my wife has brought home against my permission. And obviously, I've been around racing my whole life. Grew up in it. My dad did it, and a lot of times I wish he would have picked a different sport. But you know, here we are, still plugging along.
I've said that myself. I'm like, man, if my dad had introduced me to like fishing or hunting, maybe we'd be doing something different. But we wouldn't be where we are today, and we wouldn't have what we have today as far as the camaraderie and the friendships.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Maybe sitting in the deer blind with a guy drinking beer might be more fun than this, but I don't know.
I've done that a couple of times, throughout my life, and I hate it every time. Like, this is so boring.
I've only hunted 2 times in my whole life, and the first time I was told I was too loud.
Yeah, so. Yeah. You just sit there for like 8 hours, and the last time I went hunting, I called John Leda, and it was too easy because he took me, and he's like, "Yeah, just wait a minute," and there's like crap loads of deer just come out, and it's like, take your pick, which one you want, and I'm like, well, we can do this every time. This is easy.
Anytime, every time, we'll do this
for sure.
Awesome. All right, so here we go. We're going to dabble into the Whiteaker Pass. So obviously, your dad did some racing. But before that, you had your grandpa. Your grandpa was huge in your life. So tell us a little bit about your grandpa and where he stood with you, and how your grandpa helped to get your dad involved, obviously, which led into you racing, which from there led into a whole family of racing after that.
Me and my grandfather were always really, really close. I spent a lot of weekends at his house. You know, I was the grandson that would mow his yard, and
he lived here in town?
He did. He lived here in town, and him and my dad were close. And then, you know, I was the favorite grandson. I was pretty much the only grandson he had that came around, and spent a lot of time with him. I mean, a lot of good stories. I mean, I went to my first strip club with him when I was 8. You know, like, probably wasn't a good thing.
Living the dream.
He liked to drink and have a good time, and I did a lot of things I shouldn't. You know, we're talking about fishing, and he'd have a little too much, and I'm 9 years old driving home. And my dad's picked me up from a lot of times. And these aren't, I mean, at the time they weren't good stories, but it's crazy to look back on it now. And I tell my parents all the time, like, why'd y'all let me do that? You know?
Well, it made you who you are today.
My grandfather was a person that nobody disliked, and he didn't dislike anybody. And, you know, I feel like I'm kind of almost like him because it takes a lot for me to not like somebody. But he was definitely a big influence on, who I am today, all the way to the fact that he retired from Valero as a master electrician, and I wanted to be electrician, but I'm colorblind, so that it kind of, I don't want to be getting mixed up on wires and stuff. But and then you had to go to school, and I hated school. So
school was tough.
Yeah, it wasn't for me.
School is not for you.
But yeah, he was a big influence in my life. You know, I miss him every day. You know, but he definitely had a huge impact on the way I think about things.
You and I talked one time, and because my dad passed away a few years ago, and you and I discussed that, and you said, "Man, I don't know what I would do without my dad." In that instance, it would be the same way as when your grandpa passed. Like you lost a very important person to you. Just like when my dad passed, people say it gets easier with time. It doesn't necessarily get easier with time. It's just
you're used to it.
You almost just have to accept it. It never gets any easier, but you just accept it. So let's talk a little bit about how your dad got involved. Obviously, your grandpa played a little bit of an influence in that, and right place at the right time in some instance.
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, and I've kind of heard the story a couple of times, and I kind of asked him the other day just kind of get briefed up on how actually our family got into racing.
You had to do a little book report?
Yeah, and of course he's looking at me like, why you want to know this, dumbass? You know, so I'm like, so he basically said they lived next door to people that had race cars and just went to the track to watch. And
CC Speedway, I assume?
Yeah, CC Speedway. And I guess my grandfather worked at PCP at the time with Harold Cope.
Yeah.
And they became friends. And so my dad would like help him on his car. There was a Wilkie, I want to say Gary Wilkie, had just put a motor in his car, a fresh motor. During the week, they went to CC Speedway. My dad was probably 14 or 15. And he told my dad just to go break the motor in.
What kind of car do you think this was?
It was a Chevelle.
Just
and they built the motor. They wanted to break it in.
Stock suspension?
I'm sure it was like the 40s.
Street tires?
Yeah.
The 40s?
I'm pretty wooden tires. And
so we had Chariots. So basically your dad was racing a Chevelle Chariot.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I guess my dad said, like, I just got in there, started making laps, and he would stand at the end of the straightaway, like for me to let off here. And he's like, you know, the next week, you know, me and him and my grandfather and my uncle, his brother-in-law, they built their first car and went racing.
That set off the Whitaker racing.
You just had to find a Chevelle and put a Schedule 40 roll cage in it, and
with rubber tires instead of the wood ones.
Yeah.
No, I think that was pretty common back then. They just built them heavy because that kind of steel was cheap and it was readily available, especially around here. Down south, it was the same way. Drill strum race cars, pig iron for bumpers.
Yeah.
The heavier the tanks, they were just tanks. They geared them so they can hear them, and it was a different scenario back then. But do you got any other stories about your dad and some of his antics and some of his racing when he was coming through?
Man, they raced the stock cars. I think they raced at Riverside, went to dirt, and you know he started at C Speedway, and then I'm pretty sure when he went to dirt, he like never went back. Like that's where he wanted to be.
So he started off racing like a stock car type car at the dirt track?
Yeah. And then I want to say he mentioned like his favorite driver was like a Copeland maybe.
Okay.
And it was just somebody that didn't put up no shit. That's what he said. Like, you know, if you did him wrong, he's going to be at your pits, you know, but it wasn't long into that. And next thing you know, he's in a full blown late model. Like, and he tells me, it's like, we didn't know what we were doing. Like, you know, we talk about it all the time because, you know.
How did you end up with the late model? Do you have any idea how that happened?
My other grandfather, Larry, he owned some late models and had some people driving them. And I think my dad kind of just got in there a little bit and then ended up getting his own late model and drove some Masterbuilts over the time, ran Houston a lot. Maybe travel a little bit, Louisiana a little further.
Was traveling a big deal back then? Like, right. So obviously we both were at a racetrack, basically 2 hours away last night, but was traveling such a big deal back then? Like, it seemed like, I don't know. I look back now and I look at some of the vehicles that those guys were hauling their race cars with, and the race cars were worth way more than the haul vehicles. But was there a lot of the locals traveling with your dad and doing some of that stuff?
I mean, I have vivid memories of being in a gasoline Chevy Dually with the open trailer with, back then they had like 30-row tire racks. Like,
yes.
It was
baking in the sun.
Yeah. The cost of the trailer was determined on how many tire racks are on this thing. I don't know why you would go race one day and have 108 tires on this trailer.
You might have a flat.
I remember having the camper on the back, like cover those bundles that cover the bed, and just laying back there. I have memories of sitting between my dad driving and my grandfather, and my grandfather Jerry's like teaching me how to tell time on his watch, like stuff like that,
No, but those are good memories. Those are great memories.
That's one of those just little things you just don't forget. I just remember like holding this little flexible, those watch bands and just me counting the numbers on it, like just little stuff like that. But, those are when Big H was dirt, and I think it's been several years because there wasn't a South Texas Speedway didn't open until 95, wasn't built till 95. So. Yeah. And then when it was built, I kind of just stuck around home. I
remember coming up here with Robbie Daniels. He was running a modified, and we had a little late model deal, and we would run Goliad with his late model. And I think he ended up trading that car off to Robbie Adams. But I recall when this place opened up, it was like the Taj Mahal of dirt tracks, at least for South Texas. Nothing will ever trump Rio Grande Speedway in my eyes because that's my home track. But this was a pretty nice place. Man, those memories like you talked about, learning to tell time in that truck, like those are things you're going to keep forever. And those are memories that they seem so small, but they're really huge in the grand scheme of things. So.
I loved being around the cars, going to the tracks. Like that's all I just want to do what my dad did. And he raced and had nice cars and kept them clean and was competitive. And that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't think about anything else. And until this day, like that's all I want to do. It's a lot harder now, a lot more expensive, but I just wanted my own car. I wanted to, I remember just sitting in the seat and loading it at the shop. He would put me in the seat and use a broom handle to work the clutch and just drive it around. I'm just sitting there.
Much like you've done recently.
I do that all the time, mainly because I'm too fat to get in there all the time. So if I want to move it around, I just use a broomstick.
Tell us a little bit about like the maintenance program that your dad and those guys had. They probably didn't have big fancy shops. If anything, maybe they had a garage or they were working on a concrete slab. Or tell us a little bit about what you remember of that aspect of it.
As far as places, I remember his late models in the garage for a long time. One of our houses, I remember he rented a shop off Leopard, kind of like the Violet area across from Miller's. There was some shops there he rented. He moved into Mike Carlock's shop.
The compound.
And that's kind of where I grew up. And it was thinking now what it was like back then. There's probably 20 shops there, and they're not like fancy stuff. It's your car's going to be covered, And he was probably there 15, 16 years, and everybody, John Witchy was there, Rex Henley, Bruce Beto, the Raymond Tagg, Jeremy Irvin.
It was a who's who of racing.
There was a couple, like Matt Bentley had Bugs there, working on Volkswagens. But it was racing. I remember just being there, racing bicycles with all the other kids, or
it was a camaraderie.
It was, and to be around that many. If you didn't have something, you just go two shops over and see if they got it.
Were there ever shops you just didn't go to?
No, but I think some of them knew not to come to ours. Like I was too young to realize that. But I'll say the name. Just it fits a story. But my dad respected Freddie Barnick, and I remember we had a bolt bin, and Freddie comes in there and just helps himself. And my dad's like, whatever you need, get what you need. It's just, if he respected you, you could do no wrong. He would do anything for you. But if he thought you weren't a respectable person, or he had his opinion made up, it was going to take a long time for you to change that. And so I didn't know any better. I would go to anybody's shop that I wanted. But it seemed like there was, now when I look back now, there was a couple that were kind of scared to walk through that door.
From my recollection, there were some pretty big parties out there.
A lot.
I'm going to assume Friday nights were, as they say, lit. Just getting race cars ready.
I've been throwing crap since I was 8 years old. It's
learning the game, learning the trade.
Mike Brown bring out them dice, and here I am. Got my dollar bills out, ready to play.
How old were you when you were at Carlock's place, roughly? When you actually started working on your cars there?
When I started racing, I was there. I started in 2001. Larry Smith was there. He was another one that was there. And my grandpa was a gambler, and I think he won a football pot, or his bookie, he won, and he's like, we're gonna buy a race. I'm gonna buy you a car. Spent $2,500, bought a race-ready 4-door, beat-up red and white Impala.
Cream puff.
Oh man, speedometer worked, stock steering wheel was in it, and drove it out of Larry's door into ours. And I was 12 years old. My dad took me to Pleasant my first race and gave me his old Masterbuilt fire suit. And he go out there, and I remember my mom's like, "Are you gonna tell him anything?" And he's like, "You go out there and make circles," So I raced, and I don't remember how I did the first time or second time, but I remember my third time I won, and I think I was about to turn 13, and racing was a little different back then. You weren't as welcomed, and they realized I wasn't 16, and some of the drivers really didn't take well to that, and I was asked not to come back. So I kind of finished like in my 14. I went to Goliad. I started racing Goliad.
So they were asking you not to come back strictly because of your age?
I needed to be 16 to race.
Okay.
And then I got a modified when I was 15, and I went back again, and they asked for my driver's license, so I couldn't. But so I had to. I raced Goliad quite a bit. Like that first year with that 4-door Impala, I remember that I had won 3 in a row, and this it was a lady driver, and she was fast. I don't remember her name, but I want to say it was a pink car, like 70 something was the number. And
wasn't Pam Carter, was it?
No. But I had just won 3 in a row, and it's like last lap, and I'm right behind her.
You dumped her?
I just ran all over her going into 3. Well, I won my 4th race, but I felt like crap, and I had to go apologize to her. That's kind of like one of those turning points in your like that's what you're not supposed to do,
Yeah. It was a life lesson for you.
Yeah, like I got the win, but after that I was like, nah, that was
Did she
wrong.
protest your transmission?
No, she didn't protest my Saginaw. But I ran that car for some reason over the off season. My dad thought it'd be a good idea just to cut this thing in half. So
literally cut it in half.
Yeah, he took the Impala and put it on jack stands, pulled everything off, cut the cage off of it, cut the frame in half, shortened it 8 inches, welded it back together.
Both sides were the same?
Yeah, well, our tape measure might have been a little off.
He didn't have his glasses that day.
No, we had 2 different tape measures. So welded it back together, put a regal body on it, and it was like one of the nicest cars out there.
And he had a good time because it was for you. Like, I'm sure he really enjoyed that.
Yeah, we had some serious, like everybody, I remember Larry Smith come over and like, y'all are dumb for doing this. You got like NASCAR hours in this thing. Like, it was a nice car. I ran my second year with that. When I say 2003, I drove a Camaro for Randy Young all year in McAllen, won a bunch of races. That car taught me a lot.
Did you primarily race in McAllen with Randy stuff, or did you travel?
No, I don't know how they worked it out, but he wanted me to drive it. It was something that they just had playing around, and it was a street stock, like bigger motor car, like 406, but you had American racers, and it was a Camaro, like, no traction on dirt. Like it really taught me drivability. I had more power than I could use. I don't know, won 12 or 13 races, won the championship.
Was it like a Camaro strut car or like an old school Camaro?
It was Camaro. Okay. And then I just remember how rusted out it was. The roof, like there was no roof on it, but
you were living the dream. You were racing a car.
Yeah, my grandpa or my dad would drive me down there every Saturday, get there a little early, go to Randy's shop, finish it up if I need to. Sometimes I'd go straight to the track and race it. And
you just brought your helmet bag.
That's it.
I'm a racer. I'm Jeff Gordon.
And after that's when I started my mod racing. We didn't have sport mods and stuff then, so straight to modified.
Yeah. So your grandpa's still heavily involved. Your grandpa's been there the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, your dad was racing. You showed me some photos earlier. We went over a little bit of some Whitaker nostalgia. It does appear that you and your dad did get to race together. I myself got to race with my dad doing some dwarf car stuff. I really enjoyed that, to be able to say that I got to do that. So why don't you tell us maybe some experiences with you and your dad racing on the track together?
When I got into modifieds, he got me, I think they're pretty much, splitting everything monetary, like money wise. Obviously I'm 14 or 15, bought a Smiley's car from, either Tanner Whitmire or Jerry Edwards. I don't know who owned it at the time, but it used to be Lawrence's. Tanner drove it. It was wrecked in the back end. Bought the car, put a rear clip on it, put probably one of the ugliest graphics that I've ever had in my career on it. And
you didn't design them yourself?
No, it was no. So we, and that's what I remember. He made me start in the back all the time. He had a yellow and gray D&M chassis, pretty new, and And one time I did good in a heat race, and I was going to start third in this feature in McAllen, right?
No, sir.
And everybody was telling him, man, just let him start there. And I'm like, man, I want to start there. And I was like, no, like go to the back. And I'm like, I'll just wait. He's like, you know what, fine, start there. First lap, going to 3, I spun out for the whole field. And the only car tore up was my dad's and mine, you know. And he was mad, you know, and I'm like, man,
how did you know your dad was mad?
Well, I mean, he politely told me, you know. You know, I knew he was mad, you know. I mean, like the frame rail was broke on his car. Like it was wrecked, you know. And then of course, me, the one that spun out, I just drive away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's been those life lessons. And then, you know, once I got better, my dad was pretty much like, we both can't have nice stuff here. So he quickly and had no problem stepping away, but I didn't want him to step away. So I always found moments of, you know, hey, drive this car. You know, one time, I think it was like 2006 here. David Shurry went to Vegas, and our mod count car was our car count was like falling a little bit. We had like 15 cars every race. So I called David. I said, hey, I'm gonna drive your car this week. I mean, I maintain them all the time anyway. And he's like, well, why? And I said, well, I'm gonna put my dad in mine. He's like, all right, no problem. You know, my dad kicked all our ass like bad. And you know, now he's talking.
He had a smile on his face.
Yeah, he was happy. But I mean, he won, you know, and in my car, and I'm back there like fourth in David's. You know, I had broke a pull bar in the heat and had no brakes, you know, but still, like he was fast. So I tried to keep him in the seat, you know. A couple of sport mods, you know, like I think one of the first December races, you know, he made the race, finished like 5th or 6th or something like that. But
December races here in Corpus?
Yeah, one of the shootout races and the limited races. But, you know, after that, I just kind of took over, and that was it. I don't think he's drove since 2008 or 9 or something like that.
But he also was still heavily involved working on the cars, maintaining, doing that kind of stuff. My grandpa wanted to do everything for me. Whatever we needed, he would get. But my dad had some siblings that didn't really agree with that. So I was at home still in high school. My grandpa knocked on the front door. We had just sold and this will tell you where my priorities were. He had a black 44-foot trailer that he bought from Romco, and we hauled mine and my dad's car in it. He sold it, come to the house, and he handed me a check for $8,000. He said, you know, this is half of what I sold the trailer for. I just can't do it like I used to, you know. And I said, okay, yeah. And I took that $8,000, and at 18 years old, I went and financed a $55,000 living quarter trailer, 50 foot long. Now, granted, I'm driving a half-ton pickup, you know. So I got to get my Uncle Mike, Dustin's dad. He's got an 02 Ford Dually. Going on tour.
I'm like about to sign the line at the bank, and I'm like, hey, can I use your truck to pull this trailer to the races, you know? And he was like, yeah, you know, and he supplied it for a long time, you know, and my grandpa still went with me everywhere. And I kind of took over all that. My dad helped out a bunch. And then my dad started making a good money, more than he did. And then he started helping out a lot more. And, you know, to this day, it's 50-50. Sometimes it's me 100 and sometimes it's him 100. But
it's a family affair.
You can. If we need something, we sit down and figure out how we can get it. But, you know, that's kind of like, you know, I graduated high school and went to work for Owen Pittman at the refinery and had a good job, and just kind of still wanted to race. So it's kind of where I spent all my money.
Spent it on racing. Racing and wild women?
Oh, yeah.
Or at least one wild woman.
Tons of wild women. A lot of personality. One woman, just a lot of personality.
I met a few earlier. Yeah. They were both kind of polite.
You got lucky. I seen she kept grabbing the natty lights, and I told myself, she's like, y'all are 2 away of open up a can that you can't close.
We did win the Natty 30 in-house last night, so we're pretty pumped about that. So, man, I met your dad. I've seen your dad at the racetrack. I remember your grandpa being there. Your grandpa just seemed like he really enjoyed being at the races. So tell us, I know you mentioned earlier that someone had asked your dad if he was going to give you any advice about going on the track. Just go out there and make circles, and he didn't want you to start in your position, start in the back. But how did he help you transition into the Steven Whiteaker that we know now? I mean, obviously, he had to give some input. He had to teach you some values as far as maintaining the cars and working on them. Like, what were some of the things that you remember the most about what he instilled in you about that stuff?
He was very hard on me about making sure myself's presentable. Like, I wasn't going to half-ass nothing. And I can't sit here and pinpoint every little thing because he's done everything for me. Like he taught me everything that I know now. And I feel like every father, and now that I'm a dad, I know, like, I want my sons to know what I know now extremely early and then build on it. And that's what I did with my dad. You know, my dad's a really good mechanic, like work on anything, fixing, like it's stupid, the stuff that he can just look at. And like, I built the transmission, and that 02 dually, I ended up buying that from my uncle, from him. And the transmission went out, and we're going to pull it out. And I get underneath it with him, and he looks at me, he's like, it'd just be quicker if you just let me do this. You know,
just get out of my way.
He was come from the commission days, like 30 minutes, this thing will be on the ground, you know? So really mechanically inclined. So he always makes sure my stuff ran. And when I really started racing in 2005 and 6 and got Jason Hughes cars and started learning the technology of things, now I started making him handle way better, and he continued to do the mechanical side, you know, so wiring.
The two worlds came together.
And to this day, it's still the same thing. If I get a brand new car to put together, like, it's your job to wire it and run the brake lines. I'll do everything else. And I mean, he just knows that it'll sit there. Like, it ain't leaving to you but brake lines on it, because I'm not doing it, you know. But that's, you know, to this day, it still works the same thing. But I mean, everything that I know today has been from him. You know, I took what he knew and tried to build on it, you know, but he's very much still needed. Like, he wasn't at the race this weekend, and you kind of, the little shit that you kind of forget about, like, that he does, you know. And so, but I mean, I can't pinpoint one thing because it's everything.
No, I understand the aspect of what your dad instilled in you. And as you mentioned, you have your son, who is heavily involved in racing now, and others possibly to follow down those footsteps. Like, do you want all of your children to go down the line of racing?
No, I don't want any of them to.
Well, it's too late for that.
It wasn't. I'm gonna, if my children want to do something, I'm gonna make sure they get an opportunity at it. But racing's not like it used to be, and there's no clean slates. You know, I've been racing for 24 years, and I still get the reputation from my father.
Yeah.
So I spent 22 years and there's no clean slate. So what's my kid's going to get? And I don't want to be around that. Like, I had heroes racing, and when I got competitive, they were no longer my heroes.
Who were some of your heroes? And it doesn't have to be local. Like, who?
No, if you want to know my favorite driver that treated me great when I was a kid, hung around his race car, like, always made jokes like, man, when you get older, I'm going to sign a contract so you race. And it was Jimmy Meklinchuk.
Really?
And to this day, like, yeah, we probably had our differences, but I talk to him every once in a while. He'll call me, you know, and he'll call me and then just bitch me out because I never answer his phone call. And once that's over, like, we have a good conversation. But I thought he was one of the greatest drivers. I mean, he could just not race for a long time and then show up with the most unprepared car you ever seen. You know, he's changing transmission fluid in the pits, you know, and just go out there and just wax ass.
He hated sail panels. I don't know if you know, there's another.
His body techniques were always out there, but
he was kind of his own character, and I do believe he was a very talented individual.
I think so. For as little as he worked with, like, I just liked the way he treated me, you know, like, as a kid, you know. And I never raced with them, but, you know, a couple years ago, I took Steven to Pleasanton, and he walked over to borrow something, and I introduced him to my son as my favorite driver, and he looked at me like, "What?" And then he called me. He's like, "Hey, did you really, like, mean that?" I'm like, "Yeah," like, which I thought he knew that already. Like, we've talked about it. You know, we went a long time. Like,
he asked you for your autograph.
He has about 300,000 times.
I keep seeing him on eBay. I know who's putting them on there.
I know, but that was my favorite driver. There was a lot of other, you know, your local legends that were, man, they treated me like shit when I got competitive, and I've told myself that, and this is why, you know, Parker Tisman just won his first race, right? Me as the situation that I'm in, I enjoy watching that. I've enjoyed watching the kids race, and I'm going to make sure that I go out of my way and shake his hand firmly and make sure that he knows that I'm proud of him, because I feel like I'm getting a little older. My retirement's coming soon. And I want these kids to know that the ones that used to win still are rooting for you.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing great, kid. Just keep going, you know. And I didn't have that when I was young. It was, you shouldn't outrun me. Like, you don't deserve to. You know.
I think it's easier nowadays because there's more youngsters coming up in the ranks. I think it's, to some racers, I think it's easier to accept that the youngsters are here back when you were doing it, it probably wasn't easy because it wasn't happening as often. I mean, were there any, when you were kind of up and coming like that, were there any other really young
Josh Mike raced for a little while. He's a little younger than me. And he was going to be good, and they just kind of got out of racing. I don't really remember any.
I'm saying, but now if I say, hey, name off some of the young guns, there's a handful of them. I think it's easier for people to accept.
For sure.
Not everybody likes it, but
No.
I think it's easy.
I mean, nobody wants to get outrun by a 12-year-old, you know? Like, I mean, I wasn't here for a lot, you know? Like, and when I graduated high school, I went and raced USMTS. I started the Southern Series, then I did the East and the West region, and then I would Minnesota a couple times a year, Wisconsin.
What made you decide to pull the trigger and actually do that touring deal?
I
Because
like getting...
there had to be a stress on home life. There had to be a stress on work life. There had to be a stress on the pocketbook.
So, like I said, I had a good job, you know, 4 days a week, and my head was just in race. That's all I wanted to do.
How many days a week do you work now?
I work every day. I'm working right now. But I had modifieds, you know, and in 2007, the USMTS announced their Southern Series, like 23 races. And I live in northern Mexico down here, you know. Everywhere for me is 8, 12 hours, you know. So I went to them all, and I remember going to my first one in Oklahoma. Silent Springs, it's actually Arrowhead now, and we revamped bad, but I went there. And I finished 5th and 10th.
So tell us a little bit about the cars that you're racing. What were those modifieds back then?
They were, you can compare them today because by that time I had a used car. I had a 4-lane car. Like they weren't as advanced as they are today, but that was the start of the technology. Okay. And then I was racing against Shryock and Mark Noble and Hughes and Jay Notaboom and
during the boom of the USMTS.
Yeah, and I remember I finished 10th and 5th. I mean, it's 50 cars there, and I was like, this shit's easy, you know, like.
I got this.
Yeah, I didn't qualify for the next 13 races. Like, didn't get out of the B main.
The humble pie.
The next race, and this is me, 18, me, my grandfather, and my girlfriend, my wife at the time, my wife now, go to Enid, Oklahoma. And I'm 18. Got my uncle's dually, my 50-foot trailer. I pull up, and this is an old horse track. And I'm like, we're not ready for this. Like, I got a 383 flat-tapping motor. Like, my spare one's an old 360 that's worse than that one, you know.
It's leaking oil now.
Yeah, we blew up both motors. I blew up a motor in the heat race, and it's here. So I drag it out, get the guy. I change the motor. I had to get Marcus Sanders, Rodney Sanders' dad, to come help me stab the distributor in it because I didn't know how. But we got it running, and I blew up in the heat race the next day too. So when we came home, but and that
was an experience.
That was the turning point of like me and my dad were like, we got to up our program a little bit. So we found some used motors, and I ran like that for a while, and by the time 2010 comes around, I still look back. I don't know how I did it or we did it, but we're driving around in, you know, 5150 rig, hauling 2 race-ready cars with a spare engine, you know, and just I raced for a while like that. All I did was USMTS. I would come back home on an off weekend and just watch or race here, but I would go out of town and be competitive and come home and like lap the field. And then the more you stay home, you kind of only fast you race with. And then I would go out of town and get my ass kicked, and it would be a little while. But
no, there's a saying that says you're only as good as who you race. Yeah. And if you stay local, then you learn everybody else's mistakes, and you just learn to capitalize on them when you actually have to go race with folks that are really putting the power to the ground.
Yep.
And a lot of those guys you're racing with were racing for a living.
Absolutely.
That's a different aspect when you're racing to put groceries on the table versus just going racing Saturday because you ain't got nothing else to do.
And like racing for a living in the end of 2012, I got fired from that good job, and it was because that's all I wanted to do. That's all I thought about. Like I was screwing up there, and I guess they just got tired of, you know, and
things happen.
Yeah. So I told Carolyn, my wife, what I don't know what we were back then, but we were married then. Yeah, we were married. We already had Steven. We're married. Yeah, it's 2012.
She's not here. We won't ask her.
Yeah. In my head, I was thinking like, man, I better figure this out quick.
We try to keep like the dates vague and stuff, so it keeps me out of trouble too.
Yeah. So I told her, I was like, hey, I'm gonna take the rest of the year off. It's at the beginning of December because I have some cars to put together because I'm doing this stuff at night. You know, like go to work.
So were you working on customers' cars
at
the current time?
I was actually assembling a bunch of cars for Express at the time, working on modifieds.
Like the Express dealer for a while.
I sold a bunch of cars, and so I started doing that, and
you
then
probably sold more cars than Aber sold, and you were selling Aber's cars.
Yeah, I don't know about. I mean, I sold a lot, but
they were thick.
it was nothing to have 4 or 5 chassis in the shop at the time, but
every time I turned around, like, I got a new Express from Stevie, and I'm like, I got a Big Chief.
Yeah. You're a Lone Ranger out there.
Was.
Shout out to Eddie Martin.
He's still trying to wheel it.
Yeah. I told her, I was like, so I did that. It turned into like the rest of the year. I kept doing it, and I'm fortunate enough that she has her head on her shoulders and is responsible and can hold down the family if I can't, So I was still racing my modified, going out of town. I'm basically racing for a living and working on cars now. Started 2013. I'm actually doing good, and
where were you racing when you were doing this?
I was just following the tour.
The full tour series?
Yeah, it was. They were still doing the Southern Series. They split it up to East and a West region. I did them both, and I would still hit the Crown Jewels. And I'd go to Minnesota twice a year, Lakeside, like King of America in Kansas. Like I would still hit those. So I'm racing 50, 60 times a year. I did good in the points, and Todd Staley with USN approaches me. He's like, "Well, would you want to run the hunt?" And the hunt, like you qualify for the hunt, and you it's like 23 races, and like it's a lot of races in 1 month.
It's a whole nother.
It's the championship hunts, So I said, man, I don't think I can do that, And he's like, well, what if I got you a sponsor? And they had Casey's General Stores that sponsored, and they picked 3 drivers every year. So my year, I had Cheetos, and that's how I got the Cheetos deal. And
did they pay you in Cheetos? Cases and cases of them?
No, luckily no. I mean, because I would have been this big back then. But
I would just see you like trying to sell your Cheetos out of the back of the trailer, trying to get to the next race.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good deal. They gave you money, fire suits, hero cards, wraps. I mean, it was a good deal. And then you had to make appearances at the Casey stores, and so I had 2 cars with me, and I made sure one stayed clean. And it's different up in racing country. I mean, you pull up to a Casey store, which is like a Stripes here, but Casey's is way better.
It's a big deal.
You unload your car, and they're coming out taking pictures. I mean, you literally got like, hey guys, I got to get to the track down the road.
In the middle of racing country.
Yeah. I mean, I would sell out of shirts. I mean, I can race for a year and sell 2 shirts locally. I can't keep them on the trailer if I go out of town. It's still like that today.
Yeah.
But I ran that whole tour, and I had to ask for permission because we had just had our second boy Jace in March. And here I am in June. I got to tell her, like, I'm going to go racing for 40 days and I'm not coming home.
At least she didn't name him Cheeto.
Yeah. So I was gone for, a month and a half and didn't come back. And, I mean, there were some phone calls that, weren't very pleasant, but, I mean, she held it down. And like I said, I'm fortunate that
made you who you are today.
That she put up with a lot of that stuff. But that was, after that, I had about 2 more years, and I was like, well, we started having more, like the kids were there, I couldn't travel that much. I didn't want to. I wanted to be home more, and so. So
tell us a little bit about. Obviously, you told us you lost 2 motors in the beginning of that chase of the USMTS deal. But tell us some of the highs and lows as far as some on track stuff. Obviously, the family side of it you kind of touched base on there, but there had to be some highs and lows of some of the stuff on track. So tell us some of those stories and/or adventures.
2009, I was in Ardmore. I have this picture hanging, and I made a post about this a couple years ago. I have a very picture that means a picture in a frame that Terry Langford gave me. I led 38 laps of a USMTS race. And I'm driving a Jason Hughes car, and we'd have a caution, and Jason would pull up beside me and give me the thumbs up. Like, you're doing good,
Just keep doing what you're doing.
With 5 to go, like he went right around me. And then we battled for a while, and I'm at the top of the racetrack. Jason's in the middle, and Kelly Shryock's at the very bottom. I mean, we're 3 wide for like the last 5 laps. Jason ended up winning, and I barely beat Kelly Shryock to the line. But these are 2 of the greats, right? And I just raced like, and I when we were competitive, but I never like raced with them, and like they were always just way ahead. And I thought like that was my only shot to win one of these races, because there's people that race for years and never win one.
Did you feel like that was it?
Like, I thought that was my shot. Like I blew it. We were still on methanol. We're still a little behind then. I was on methanol, 40 laps. I had no track. I had nowhere percent at the end, just burned 20. They're on gas. We came home, reevaluated again. All right, let's get a carburetor. Larry's carburetors actually had rent programs. So I called Larry's. They rent you a carburetor for the year, because we're still like, we got what we need, but we're.
Then you had some sponsors helping, but it's still a very expensive venture.
For sure. In June of that year, I started 17th in Little Rock, Arkansas, and just got on the top. The next thing you know, I'm 2nd or 3rd. Had a restart. Jared Landers wrecked on the start, and I got the lead and led. That was my first win on a Tuesday.
So
Wednesday maybe.
Since it was a rent a carburetor deal, was it like rent a tire, like you walk to the pits and they got their carburetor repoed every now and then?
Man, I'm sure it happened at some point, I'm sure some of those got, but Larry's was like excellent. Like a lot of people had his stuff.
I got a stack of carburetors over there now. I'm kind of thinking maybe I should do that.
It was like $500. It was $400, and you just use it all year and send it back at the end of the year. It was great for someone like me, And what's funny is like I kept doing it. And he's like, you're like one of my last few that's still renting them. Like in other words, buy your own, But it was easy.
I'll show you that one.
Yeah. But yeah, that was I won in Little Rock my first race. My dad was there. I always told myself, and I told my family, like if I ever win one, I'm never coming home. Because they were hard to do it.
So then you had to make that decision.
I had to come home. Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't all as cracked up to be. It was good for a couple of days. And we ran good there for a couple of years.
Living on the road has got to be tough. Living on the road, working on the cars in Walmart parking lots.
We did a lot of work in other people's shops. I spent a lot of time in at Jason's shop. He treated me like family. And
did you feel like when you were away from home, all those racers just accepted you as a normal racer, just trying to make a living, where you weren't really like that guy or a bad guy or a good guy? It was just another racer with those guys just trying to make it.
I didn't really communicate with a lot of, because I wasn't here. I think a lot of people didn't know me, were afraid to approach, or I'm sure I had some fans. I'm sure I had some that were, jealous. But I always just kind of stayed to myself. I had friends. I just didn't really. I didn't know if I was liked or not. I just knew when I hung a shirt out the back of my trailer, like I didn't sell them at home. And that was always like, well, it's not going to work, Man, that kind of, the USMTS, that was a big part of my career. Like I was fortunate to win 3 of them. And one of them, coming in Goliad in 2015, so that's when I decided that my modified days were over. We had Hughes cars, Mullins motors forever. And I told my dad that I didn't want to race the same car and the same motor my whole career. So we got a GRT. I was a huge fan of Terry Phillips. Went to him like, hey, can we get a car from you? And he's like, you serious? Because I've been driving Hughes cars for 13 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And I explained to him and had to sit down with Jason, told him. And, he was like, I'm not going to be mad at someone trying to better themselves, Got a Durham motor and raced it a couple of times. And it was like really good, and went to Goliad. And
was it as good as you thought it was going to be?
Yeah,
was it a better transition for you? Or?
Things were evolving. The Hughes cars were kind of struggling, but I was loyal. Like, I'm sticking here. Everybody done left. Everybody said I'm not going nowhere. But man, Jason was always good to me. Like, there was times when I needed a motor and he financed no problem. There was times where I picked up a new car and he looked at me like, I'm loaded this car on the trailer, and he's like, did you bring any money? And I'm like, nope. He's like, all right, be careful going home. Like, he took good care of me. And I still have people like that today, like Kay Dillard send me stuff, and he knows I got 4 kids at home. I don't need this quick change, He knows I can't tell my wife I need to send $3,500 for this rear end. So it's just, hey man, just let me know when you get it, But I feel like
that's a bond that
I've earned those relationships,
build, right?
But I won that race, and after that, I just kind of stayed around home and raced sport mods only. And
what do you think your life would have been had you not chased that USMTS?
I'd have been divorced.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was hard. Like, it was getting hard. I mean, I needed to be there. Like, did I want to do that? Yeah, but it's not real. I'm not going nowhere. I'm not going to be the next Scott Blomqvist. Like, nobody's buying me shit to drive. Like, it was getting too much. When you can't race all the time, you're not as good. So Then I started racing 5 times a year, and 2016 bought a tow truck, and it's kind of where I kind of took a break.
The self-employed business, it consumes you.
Yeah, well, I got used to just working for myself, and I didn't want to go work for nobody else. Obviously it'd been a lot easier than guaranteed money, but I enjoyed working for myself.
It gives you the freedom. It gives you a little bit of freedom as far as having some time to do some things. Erica and myself, we have some businesses of our own, and it works out in our favor with the kids, trying to get the kids to and from and do some different things. And obviously, it helps out on the racing side, being able to work on some stuff and get some things done at our pace versus somebody else's pace. And I think the common misconception is that we own our small business or you own your small business and we're loaded. We got money falling out of our pockets, and that's really not the case. Obviously, through your racing career, you've gathered sponsors and had people that have stood behind you for numerous years. David Shurry being one of them. Absolutely. Some of the other sponsors that you have been with you a long time. I do not, and this actually happened a long time ago. I was partners with a gentleman, and one of our employees told him that it must be nice to have that kind of money. And he got very upset. And I didn't understand why he was so upset until I became my own boss, paying taxes, paying all that, being self-employed. And somebody told me the same thing, and it really upset me because they didn't realize that I didn't sleep for 4 nights before because I was trying to make payroll. Mm-hmm. They didn't understand that I was trying to put money together to pay their Christmas bonuses. Like, they don't see that behind the scenes stuff.
No, nobody does. They're just quick to judge, and
because your shit's fancy, and your shit's clean, and so be it. So you and I had that discussion.
You didn't listen.
I didn't listen.
Look at you.
I sold the car. I sold the car.
Must be nice.
Now I'm washed up. Yeah. No, it must be nice.
Must be nice.
Looking back, like when my dad was racing, and back like when your dad was racing, we worked out of a plywood shop with a concrete slab. Not this at all. Like when I got this place, my dad was still alive. This was like a NASCAR garage to him. Like, he was floored by this. He could not fathom, number one, how I was going to pay for it, but he could not fathom the amount of race cars that were in and out of here, because it is a little bit of a different time.
Speaking of David Shurry has helped me tremendously. And he wasn't just a sponsor. Like, I went to him for a lot of advice, he was always there for me, like pretty much a second dad, and, I remember I sold him a modified, and he ran good for like 3 races, and then just started falling off. Whether it was the washing car with water well rusted, like it was just maintenance, and he finally got pissed off and said, "Just come pick this thing up," So I went and got it, and I enjoyed. That's what got me with a lot of stuff. I would work on the stuff, and then I would go to the shop and work on it, and then I got to where I'd pick it up and bring it to mine, and then 3 years later, like, hey man, just show up to the track. I'll just we would tow it out there.
It's easier that way.
He would race, and I would take it back. Like, he didn't question, like, as long as his stuff was, I made sure it was clean, he had what he needed. He won a couple of races, and I really don't think I felt like I had a big part in him winning those races. There was times where I had to talk him into race, like, man, it's too much work. Don't worry about the work. He got in a wreck a couple times. I know one time for sure, and knocked the back clip off a modified. And he's like, we'll be out. And I'm like, well, you'll be out here next Saturday. And me and my dad are there building that, Yeah. There was times where he needed me, and there's times where I needed him. And he was a long time there. Anything that I needed, whether it was help with some tires or life advice, like he was always
more
there.
than just a supporter,
for sure,
a friend. He was a mentor.
Janice Shurry was on the quarter pounder for a while. That I changed to DSNS, and they're retired. Like, they can't be just willy nilly like giving this idiot money for his race car. So. I understood that, and keep his name on there. I respect the family. They did a lot for me. And for me to take it off the quarter panel this year, like, my car looks naked. Like,
it does have a different appearance.
I don't, and there's no problem there. So, like, I need to find somebody that could help me. So people see a blank space, they ask about it. Hopefully, one day it'll be there. But that's one person for sure that, he was always there for advice, and he laughed at me when I didn't take it a lot of times.
Probably ranks right up there with your grandpa and your dad. For sure.
Like I said, he was a second dad to me. Like, I really enjoyed taking care of his racing stuff. That's the only thing I can do for you. That's the only thing I'm good at.
Yeah.
And towards the end there, it was just he trusted me with everything. Just let me know when it's ready, and I'd haul it out there, and he just
go for it.
Yeah, his back got a little worse, so he couldn't race no more. And he pretty much, like, that's the car. Like, hey, I put Steven in it. But I had Troy Cottrell help me out a bunch. There's several people that
well, this is the time. Put it all out there. Tell them thanks.
Troy,
whatever.
Yeah, Troy helped out a lot, and he loved racing, and he loved how I met Troy. He had 3 cars, and I felt like those 3 cars just tore up shit every week, right? I needed money for a modified. I told him for $2,500 I'll be 89C. And he's, we met at Bug Days. Owen introduced us, And he said, well, I might just buy the whole car. I said, well, the motor's blown up in it, but let me get it fixed and you can buy it. He said, deal. He comes to the shop and he's looking at it. He's like, there's no motor. And I said, I told you it's blown up. I sent it to get fixed. So I got the motor fixed. He bought the car. And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to come with the trailer and pick it up. I said, no, you're not. Like, you bought it. I'm going to drive for you, you know? And he's like, well, okay. So then I remember winning a feature, and he probably hadn't a trophy in a long time. Took him the trophy, and he like loved it. Well, then it was the greatest thing. He was like, man, screw the other ones, you know. So it's pretty much whatever I wanted to do. You know, modified stuff. He bought motors, bought late models. Like when he was able to, he had a good time racing and didn't regret any of it.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, obviously he's a little older. He can't get it now, but I still make sure I go and visit him once or twice a month. And I can tell that he's very appreciative because he doesn't have what he used to, and all those people left. Yeah. So, but I still think he's a good guy. You know,
at the end of the day, you look around and see who your friends really are. Yeah. We've had a lot of those incidences in my family, and you look around and say, "Man, those were my true friends." And it's humbling sometimes.
I didn't know that until 6 months ago. I hadn't seen him in a month or two, and I drove by that bar that he's at, and I saw his truck pulled in there. And he was in there having a good time with some friends, but he just leaves them, sits with me, and just talks, right? Just talks. And then when I left, I always give him a hug, you know, hey man, love you, take care. And he had like a tear in his eye. So I go pay my tab, and the bartender was like, you have no idea. She didn't know me at all. She's like, you have no idea how much he talks about you or how much he appreciates you comes in.
I'm like, still flying the 89C on your car?
I don't have the C anymore. To me, it was more of a sentimental thing. I wanted to go back to my number. But he's still a good dude, like do anything for me, you know, like I still like to make sure that I make sure that I appreciate what he did.
No, he was a good man for you as well. Where are we at today? Obviously we have First Class Towing. We have Steven III wheeling some hot rods out of the 89 Motorsports shop out there. Are you still working on customers' cars?
No,
are you guys doing much of that stuff anymore?
I don't. I still take in some, and I stopped because somebody would come by, hey, I want you to work on my car, and I'm like, all right, I have it done next week. Well, 3 months later, it's sitting there. I don't work on any cars. I mean, I do my close customers. We still do some bodies, but I've started working on some trailers. You know, we've got a couple trailers there. We're doing roofs on and stuff. I kind of enjoy it. After doing my own, I kind of enjoy it.
I remember the bit of a mess, but yeah, you got her done.
Yeah, that was all thanks to my dad, but he's not allowed to pull a trailer anymore. He didn't tow the trailer before, and now he's damn sure. Like, he just gets in the passenger seat and waits for me to get there. But, I'm just concentrating on, you know, him. I got a late model sitting on jack stands. I got a unpowder coated modified frame that I've had for 3 months on the lift. It's just
one of Cade's cars.
Yep. Yeah. It'd probably be my last one. I figured I told my wife the other day, I was like, I got maybe 2 more years and that's it. I'm done. And do I want to? Yes. Just for the fact that locally, I'm not, I know how it sounds, but I'm not used to losing. Like I win 95% of the races here. I finished second to Jared Moppin in a 12 lap late model feature. And I can't remember the last time I lost a race at 37.
Yeah, but Jared's no slouch.
No, he's not. But I want let them guys have their time. I had my 20 years.
I recall you coming down the front straightaway at Pleasanton and you forgot how wide the car was and got
so like I said, I'm concentrating on my son's car and making sure he's right. But yeah,
that's true. It happens.
Yeah, I lost that one.
How do you feel about the youngster coming on board? You talked about your dad earlier about giving you go out there and make circles. What advice have you put out?
These kids don't listen these days. Like I go to the driver's window and he's sitting there on the track and I tell him everything. I do everything but drive the car for him.
You told him to run the bottom last night.
Yeah, like you
ran the top, like he was supposed to.
After the heat race, after that e-bike, you told me like, oh, like smile. And I'm like, I told this idiot to go to the bottom and it took him 8 laps to get there. Like as I tell, and I'm hard on him. You know, he's named after me. He's my oldest. You know, like he can do no right. You know.
Do you feel like that's a lot of pressure on him?
I know I put a lot of pressure on him, but I want him to do good. And I will tell him when he does good, you know, but all you have to do is listen to me. Yeah. Like I'm trying to save you years here. I'm trying to save you years of, whatever situation you're about to be in, I've already been in it 10 times. Just listen to me. And he does well. And that the competition's out. I mean, he finished 9th, you know, people really don't realize how young he is. They think he's 15 or 16. They didn't know that he was racing pure stocks when he was 9. They didn't know when Chuck Perry drove Jerry Walter's car, he was 10 years old and went right around Chuck and won the race. He did good, you know. He raced a go-kart a couple of times, you know. They don't realize how young he just turned, you know, 13 a couple months ago.
That new crop is just younger and younger. You got Whitmire, you got the Makticheks, you got obviously you got the Whitakers and Porter.
I think him and Tripp are 6 months apart. Yeah. I mean, but obviously he's 8 times the size of Tripp. But I really enjoy seeing those kids. I make at the go-karts.
I think y'all should get back in the pure stock thing, and you have the speed stick like Tanner, and you just tell them when to go, when to lift.
I hate those cars, man. That's even so Jace is 10, and I had him in a pure stock, but he's so small and puny. He's not like Steven that I can tell in 6 laps he can't turn this 3,000-pound car, you know. And I really think he will be a good driver, but I'm not pushing these kids into it. The last thing I need is all 3 boys out there racing.
The minutes are winding down, but I wanted to touch base on something because you've been pretty adamant about this. You do not like factory stocks.
No, I don't. I drove one time and I realized it was a waste of time.
Just a waste of time and money and effort.
There's so much time. First of all, there's so much time going on the straightaway. I don't know what to do with myself. I can count fans in the stands, and then by the time you
text Johnny while you're running down,
and then when you let off, someone to run into you, you know. So it's
because you lifted, not them.
Correct, yeah. But I guess they just wait. That's how you know you're supposed to let off is when you hit the car in front of you. It's too far. But
so are they just overgrown go-karts at that point?
I just think they're just too expensive, for what they are.
Oh no, they're high dollar.
Yeah, I hate factory stocks. I just don't like them.
No, your post pretty much stated that you hated the factory.
Yeah, I couldn't get out of them quick enough. I raced that one time and I'm never again. There were so many people I was mad at. I had a brake locking up, so I was slow.
And it was only an 8-lap e-race.
Yeah, and they were just piling into me. And I'm I didn't know who to go talk to first after the race.
They might have just been piling on to you because it was Steven Whiteaker. They were like, I passed him.
I think it was the first clash, and I was actually fast and started 3rd or something like that. And then I had a flat 8 laps in, but I was in the way. I didn't know why until the rim melted, you know. And I didn't know the brakes were. I don't think the brakes were hung. It had a stock pedal in it, and I think I was on the brake the whole time. But yeah, I don't like them.
You're crammed up in there.
Yeah, a lot of them think they can drive, and it's just
factory stocks. I enjoyed them. I enjoy fender cars. I do way better in fender cars than I do in.
And so you had to go make them look pretty, and then everybody hated you.
You told me that.
If you just would have an ugly car and not win, you'd have so many friends.
Well, if I would have had that 4-door Impala, everybody would still be my friend.
If I was still racing that, you know how many friends I'd have? But no, you pull up and your truck's clean and you got a clean car, you're a piece of shit.
It happens. Man, I've had a good time today. Hopefully you enjoyed the interview. This was the Father's Day special.
I appreciate it. I've been sitting by the phone for 2 months waiting on this phone call. So.
Well, we have a list. I actually have a long list of people. And one of the biggest issues we've had is I would really like to have some of the older cats on here, but they're not too up on wanting to do this. A lot of them tell me they don't want to open up old sores. A lot of them say they don't want to rekindle any fires, and that's not necessarily what this is about.
Like I told you, I enjoyed my favorite one by far has been the Bruce Sanders one, listening to his stuff. You know, because he was in racing there, and he's still involved today building motors.
So the funny thing about the Bruce Sanders is right here where we're sitting. I had my run stand, and we were breaking an engine in that he had built. And I said, I have an idea. He said, what's that? I said, I want to have a podcast. I want to create this show. And then I told him what it was about. Are you interested? He said, hell yeah, I am. Well, then it was time for him to come on the show. No, he wasn't.
He was not.
He was not about it at all. I had to work on him. We had 14 episodes the first season, I believe. I worked on him every episode and finally got him to come on. And he had the most fun that I think he's had in a long time. And then he called me the next day and he said, I didn't realize how much work that actually was, but I have so many more stories I want to tell, and he wanted to come back.
Those are the stories you want to hear. They don't want to hear my stuff.
You'd be surprised.
I really enjoyed those old stories.
Sometimes the clarity of how you actually got where you are, because like we said, when someone says it must be nice, it's a lot of work behind the scenes.
For sure.
So I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I would like to thank you for spending your time with the Thunder Road Podcast Father's Day special. I would like to thank Steven Whiteaker Jr. for coming on the show and sharing his stories. At this time, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Rush Race Gear by Austin Witt, Proline Fabrication, 112 Bodies, S&S Monuments, and of course, Top Hat Signs and Designs.